Welcome to the Massive Change Show. I'm Justin Foster.
And I'm Dr. Virginia Lacayo. In each episode, we have conversation with leaders who are getting in some good trouble by challenging paradigms and shaking the system.
And after each conversation, the episode shifts to the second show, where Virginia and I chat about what we learned from the guest.
If you know of any leaders who will make a great guest, please introduce us.
And of course, if you enjoy the show, please like, share, and leave a review.
Thanks for listening.
In this episode of the Massive Change Show, we visit with Debra Ruh about disability inclusion, accessibility, and the urgent work of building technology and infrastructure that serves all humans at every stage of life. Enjoy the show. Hello, Debra. Welcome to the Massive Change Show.
Welcome.
Yes,
Thank you very
this is. We love serendipity. There's always this thing like, how do we meet? And I don't know. We had an initial conversation, and I think we talked way longer than the scheduled talk time, and that's usually a good indicator for a good friendship, let alone being a podcast guest. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
So tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and your background, and I encourage everyone to go actually check out Debra's stuff, but share a little bit about you before we dig into the system shaker questions.
All right. Well, I have been a technologist for a long time, and my father was a technologist before me when really nobody had any, we weren't really using technology. So he took care of the AT&T computer on 3 blocks, which now
Wow.
my iPhone, I'm sure, is as powerful as that whole building and all 3 blocks. But so I learned from my father the bleeding edge of technology, which I personally don't like that anymore. I actually like, just waiting and learning a little bit more. But so I started as a technologist, and then I also was in the banking industry, the financial industry, and I became an vice president, things like that in the banking industry. But I always felt like I had a bigger calling. Something always called to me, and I did good right where I was planted. But when my daughter was born with Down syndrome, my first daughter, when I was 28, I remember thinking, first of all, being devastated by it, but thinking, well, I wonder what this means to my life. And so when I turned 40, I decided to leave what I called corporate America. And since I do so much global work, I try to be careful how I say that. But I left the freedom and the wonder and the joys of corporate America because they paid me no matter what I did. I mean, I tried to always do my work, but it was such a blessing to get these paychecks coming into my bank account. So, how hard can an entrepreneur be, especially where you're going to try to do something good for society. But it's been a very interesting path, and very difficult, very rewarding, and it's taught me to be even more of an outlier. And especially in these new times, the way the world continues to evolve, if that's a good word to use for it. But so my focus is on, some people would think boring, but it's on disability inclusion. It's on accessibility. It's on making sure that people, no matter how we live our human lives and no matter how it facilitates our humanness, whether I can see or hear or think clearly or move correctly, whatever, we should be fully included. We're these beautiful human beings. And so my work is all about the inclusion of people with disabilities and trying to bring humanness into the technology conversations, because I get that AI could potentially kill us all, but AI could also really help humans, could help
Yeah.
humans be much better and really help us even show our humanness more. So that's that's what
Beautiful.
I do for a living.
So it's mostly the inclusion of diversity in terms of disabilities and abilities, different abilities and disabilities into the technological world, right?
Yes.
And you said that that idea started with your daughter when she
Yes.
was born. And
Yes,
how old is she now, right now?
she's 38 years old, but it is also, my focus has always been on digital, but it is also on the physical because more and more as we've gotten into our work, we talk about, people talk a lot about smart communities, smart cities. Cities aren't smart if it doesn't work for humans at every stage of their life. I just don't think it's smart. And so we realized as we started really getting into the technology, the digital conversation, certainly AI, that you can't really do that without also talking about all of the infrastructure, the physical. And bottom line, what it's being about is, we're all part of society, and we're part of society in different ways, in different amounts. Some people don't use social media or whatever, but we are still part of society, and people with disabilities are often not included in the same ways in
Mm,
society. And I'm sorry, there is no reason why that happens except we as society choose to let that happen. There is no
mm,
reason for us to act like this.
mm.
Yeah,
It's
it's
interesting.
all of a sudden takes too much effort for
Right.
the typical, right? And it's interesting because when we talk about inclusion and belonging and diversity, it's a word that we have been used lately a lot, and we're fighting for it. But unfortunately, there is still some kind of exclusion within that language, within the discourse,
Right.
that especially when it comes to people with different abilities or disabilities and neurodivergent peoples, there are two groups that have usually left off the efforts of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and is also important. It's part of the diversity, and many of us that might have some disabilities or are neurodivergent are also other identities. We're also other identities. We're also women. We're also from the Black community. We're also queer. And so it's understanding that when we talk about diversity, we're not just talking about different kind of people, but how diverse are within ourselves, all the diversities that we each one of us represent, and thinking about that way in a more holistic way. And I agree with you. And maybe you can give us some examples because we're not that educated as we wanted to think. What is the kind of exclusions, especially in technology, that we think that, when we think about disabilities, usually people immediately think of physical disabilities, visible disabilities, like not being able to walk well, or the hands, but not the many many others. And we think that this place, let's say this building, is favorable for people with disability, and we think of ramps, and
Right.
that's not even close of what we really need to make an environment friendly for all the kind of disabilities that we might have. So tell us a little bit about what you have identified as the main issues where we need to work on in terms of inclusion.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I love how you ask that question because it shows to me you know a lot more about it than you realize. But what's interesting about it is when we, once again, I'm talking about society. I talk about this from a big way, but when we as society started deciding, how we were going to do this. And so I know what we'll do. We're going to break us up into little bitty pieces. For example, you're Latino, right? Or you're Hispanic or right? So we start breaking ourselves into little pieces. And you also mentioned neurodiversity. I learned in my 50s that I was neurodiverse. I had ADHD and dyslexia, which, by the way, I always wondered why I just can't tell left from right. I didn't know why I was smart in some things, but so stupid in others. Well, it's called, Deborah, directional dyslexia. And I just can't, there's something going, and people make fun of me because I should be able to do this, but I just have struggle with left and right. I know I can hold my hand up and look at the L's, but right. But that's just the way my brain works. And so, but as we were identifying all the people with disabilities so we can protect them, right? I think we went a little overboard, and I think we just put pretty much everybody in. If you look at the laws in the United States, people with morbid obesity, for example, are part of the community. Now, my daughter has struggled with morbid obesity. I'm not saying anything like that, but what happens is if you put everybody in this disability, it's almost hard to say who isn't in it, right?
Um,
Because over a certain age, you become part of this community. I'm not threatening you. We're just these biological creatures, and our bodies change. So I'm going to tell you about it from the perspective of the people that are really being impacted, which isn't the whole 1.7 billion people we think minimum have disabilities. I think that number is very small, especially if you look at it legislatively, like here in the United States. If you look at our Americans with Disabilities Act and who's included, almost everybody is included. Anyway. But the ones that are getting left out are people that are blind, for example. People that speak differently because maybe they have speech differences. People that are hard of hearing or deaf. And so actually in some ways speak a different language. Sign language or maybe lip syncing, they speak a different language. And so people in wheelchairs, people that have mobility issues and that they can't walk upstairs, for example, or something. So I was talking, I have so many stories, but just speaking to two people the other day, I was speaking to a friend that's blind, and she's extremely talented and very qualified. And she applied for a job, and she was overqualified for the job, but she was blind. And so they didn't even interview her. She's like, Deborah, they didn't even interview me. They didn't. And I said, because they're afraid, because you're blind and you told them you were blind. Because that's what the job was about, disability inclusion. No, I talked to, groups that are just made up. Their membership is people that are blind. They're not hiring senior leaders and CEOs. I talked to a very famous group that's blind and deaf. That's what they do. I asked them how many employees that are blind and deaf that work for them, because I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
None. All right.
Goodness.
So your job is to help these people get jobs, but you won't hire them.
wow.
So and then going into education, and it is better in some ways, but it is really awful how we treat people that can't hear or can't see or can't move in the same ways or can't speak. Or you have my daughter with the intellectual disabilities. We've actually done a better job in societies of including people like my daughter with Down syndrome and autism than we have people. I mean, it's just really sad. And I had a man tell me one time that was a very senior leader in government. He said, Deborah, everybody's looking for disabled people like me. I have a master's degree and I'm sitting in a wheelchair. So it's unfortunate that we've decided, across the board, some humans are more valuable than others.
Yeah.
But we have really sad examples of how excluded the community is with the more severe disabilities.
Well, as
Yeah.
we get into the first system shaker question that sparks this question is, so we have a friend named Mohan who has written a book about his daughter's born into disability, and she died at 7 from cancer, actually, not from her direct disability. But she was blind, was one of her disabilities, and him and his wife are from India. They still live there. And one of the things that he talks about is they almost moved to the United States because the United States, from his perspective, and he was a wealthy man, so he could have gone lots of places, and he had been to lots of places in the world. But he said that the U.S. has a very different, at least at a societal level, a very different perspective. They're much more compassionate about people with disabilities compared to at least Asia, South Asia, or other parts of Asia. And I'm curious. You mentioned at the beginning of this that you do a lot of stuff around the globe. Have you seen a similar pattern that the U.S. as people, maybe not necessarily related to policy, but as people, tend to be more accepting or compassionate of disabled people?
That's a great question. And I want to say absolutely. What happened in the United States, and when I really got involved in this, like in 2000, often I would be invited to speak to other countries because we have in the United States gotten a lot right. Now, right now, we're getting a lot wrong because we're attacking DEI and
Yeah,
woke, and we're butchering the services. But before
yeah,
this, we actually, I'm not saying we had nailed it, but there was a lot we had done right, including society expects everybody to be included in a way that is not true in other cultures. It's not. So
Mm.
we're absolutely right there. This is when I started having a problem. I would say around the when we started getting into the 2000s, 2010s, and what I realized that there were other countries that were also that were leapfrogging over the United States and the United Kingdom. There's a lot of efforts that have been made in the UK and the US, very Western. We've tried, but I also think we got to a point where we sort of got stuck and we just couldn't go any further. And so I started seeing innovations happening in other countries, Latin American countries, Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, very interesting innovation. And so what I would say to them is, I know you're inviting me at the time because I'm an American. But the reality is, learn from us, but learn from our mistakes too. And do not assume that just because we did it in the US, it's the right thing to move forward. Because, we were doing our best. We've been trying to do this in the United States since 1990. I'll tell you a society that's done fabulous with this, but like everybody else, still needs to do a lot more. Spain. Spain really took care of their soldiers after some of the big wars they have. I forget the exact war, but when they did it, they gave the blind veterans that were coming back, they gave them the lottery. So in Spain, I've had multiple people say to me, if I'm going to be born blind, I want to be born in Spain.
Mm.
So it's just so the innovations coming out of certain countries. Once again, what we're seeing come out of the Middle East. Now, once again, everybody ain't perfect. We got so
Yeah.
much work to do, and there's so many problems. But we also still have around the world people with disabilities leaving their countries and coming to the United States to be educated because they can't get educated where they are. They have to leave because they're still not being included. And I was talking to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, very innovative technological country. But the reality is they're talented people with disabilities leaving, getting trained and educated in the US or the UK, moving back and still can't get a job, even though they have PhDs. So it is really a movement, but I do agree with what you said, Justin. The American people, they do not want, and it's not just the American people, but we were probably some of the early starters of this, and that we expect everybody to be included. And often Americans assume that we are, but like I said, we're on a little
Right.
bit of fire right now in the United
Right.
States. EI and
Right.
woke. A lot of stuff I'm saying, you're like, oh, really? But it is still
Yeah.
real because there's a
Yeah.
lot of
That's, yeah.
in the background.
Discerning between the spirit of Americans, most Americans, and then policies based off of the administration's defects. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, let's get into the system shaker questions because
All right.
I'm extra curious about your answer to the first one because
Yes, me too. So the first system shaker questions that we ask our guests is, what is the idea? What is your great idea that will piss off a lot of powerful people?
My great idea is billion-strong.org. What I noticed years ago, I started noticing this in, I would say in the early 2020, and I started noticing it. And sadly, my husband, who has passed away, was walking dementia. He had a traumatic brain injury. He was hit by a car by a drunk driver as a child. He survived it, grew up, married, 2 kids, but dementia came early for his beautiful brain. And so I was walking that while running my companies. So um but I was looking around and I didn't, of course, how could I predict what was going to happen in the US? I just couldn't predict we would do that twice. But anyway, we decided to do
yeah,
it twice.
yeah,
Okay. So I know I don't say the name because I just don't see any reason to do that.
right.
But give no energy to it. But what I started noticing was a lot of corporations. I've worked with so many corporations. I'm not saying they're free from doing anything wrong. I'm not saying that, but a lot of large corporations around the world have tried to meaningfully include people with disabilities, make sure the technology is fully accessible so that if I'm blind, I can still get on and use the internet, make sure my phones are accessible so that I can use it regardless if I'm blind or I speak, people want to use these technologies because it's part of society now. But what I was worried about was I worried that nobody was really coming forward in a really effective way from the community of people with disabilities, really coming together to support each other. And I was hearing things like last year was the 200th year of Braille. Which, wow, that's really pretty cool because blind people have really benefited from Braille, the language. And we see it in society all the time on the elevators, and we see Braille all the time. How exciting. Nobody talked about it. So I'm like, why is our community not together? So what I decided to do was create Billion Strong. I know it's cheeky to think I could bring a billion people together. Really? Huh? Come on. Use a hashtag, we are billion strong, but actually, I am making some really important strides. And boy, I'm pissing some people off because I'm also sort of calling out some of this ridiculousness. All these people that just go from conference to conference to conference to conference, but nothing ever happens. We don't make any headway. We still are not included. We see corporations backing off in record numbers with what's happening politically in the United States with DEI. It's like, wait a minute, you were what? So one thing I always felt was if we could bring the community together to where their voices could really be heard and there would be no doubt where we are, bring in all the groups. I don't want to replace groups. I want people to come in and let's join forces and let's talk about why we are being excluded and oh, you were excluded from that university? Well, why? So we are so much more powerful together. But it has taken me, I started it when my husband was dying in April 2022. Well, I started it a few months before that because my husband passed in March 2022. But it's interesting because at first people were like, "Oh, that's so cute. You're going to do a little identity organization." It's like, all right, it is cute, but just think of the power of the numbers. People think of the power of the numbers, and so we have gotten 114 countries involved. I have people involved from all over the world, all different types of disabilities. Most of the disability conversations are coming from the Western world. We are telling countries like, I'll say Spain, what to do when they've already figured it. Okay. So coming together to celebrate, to not just complain, but actually to talk about things. Why are you, as a blind organization, not hiring people that are blind? What? Well, maybe
Hmm.
you aren't the right blind organization then. Why are you? So there's so much misuse of information. Somebody came in and just butchered this industry. I read funds have been cut everywhere all over the world. It's just chilling what has happened. But
Yeah.
I believe that, and I know that I know there are some people that are mad at me because somebody said I have another show and that they were saying, oh, well, you can find all the experts at these conferences. And I said, well, not all the experts can actually travel to these conferences. Not all the experts have the
Correct.
funding. So please don't assume just because I'm not at a conference, I'm right. And
Yeah.
also, conferences are often so focused on Western. Not that there's anything wrong with Western, but please, can we please
Yeah.
also include other countries, please? So
You're right.
that's what I'm doing.
I love that so much. And
Mhm.
that good intentions always becomes orthodoxy. It becomes an orthodoxy. And so somebody then has to challenge those good
Mhm.
intentions, because it's the law of entropy. It's what I call in like coaching or mental health, as well as monetized codependency, or
Yes. Oh, yes. And it
yeah,
always
or
happens. Why? Why?
yeah,
And how do we avoid it not happening? How does
yeah.
women's
Well,
not do?
that's where people like you come in. It needs heretics.
Yes.
Heretics. That's why we call who we serve system shakers. We're
Hmm.
not trying to destroy all. It's not anarchy.
No.
But the systems that need to change, even the systems with good intentions. People don't like it when I say this necessarily, but a lot of the reason where we're at is because of the orthodoxies of people on the left as well, and
Oh, yeah.
they
It's
don't
definitely
want to have
based.
that conversation, right? It's not like we're people on the left are all clean and pure, and then Trump happened. I mean, it's so much more nuanced than that. So I love that that's your I love that answer. Sorry to interrupt, Virginia.
Thank you,
You know,
Jesse.
and also another thing that I love is to give a platform, not to give voice to, not to speak for, but to give a platform for people that are the real experts on
Right.
their situation, to express not just the challenge and the celebrations, but also the strategies. It's like how I'm managing, how our country did it, how our community did it, so we learn from each other. And it's when you talk about experts, I mean, I'm an academic, so I've been in tons of conference in my life, and it's always funny that most of the people that call themselves experts on a topic are not the ones suffering the topic or experiencing the topic. They
Right.
learn about it, they read about it, they study about it, they are maybe experts in policies, but not necessarily on the topic that they make the policies about. And for me, is there is a law in complexity science that is nothing about me without me. If you're
Mhm.
gonna do something about me that is gonna affect my life and I'm gonna have to execute, I'm gonna have to implement, I'm gonna have to follow the law, whatever, I need to be involved in that because it's about my life that you're talking about. And that should happen at the policy level, but all the conferences, all the spaces. So I think and you're right, the strength is in the numbers. I mean, we need to say, like, we're not the few that you hide in your houses and in the basement of the company. Is like, we're many and we have a lot of talent and we are contributing in ways that nobody else is, and
Yes.
that matters.
Virginia, you first of all, I want to tell you what a battle cry is for the community of people with disabilities for years. Hashtag nothing about us without us. What's so funny is you almost nailed that hashtag off the top of your head. That was impressive. Just want to say. There's nothing about us without us. Very common hashtag. But I also want to say you reminded me. For example, I've done a lot of work all over the world, and I one time went and I met, and I know you'll enjoy this, Virginia, but I met with Central America countries. So they weren't just Central America; they were also coming over from other Latin Americas, like Colombia is not officially Central American stuff. But one thing that, oh, and I'm going to totally blank on my point that I was making. I got it again. Oh, gosh. In Panama, Panama went to do, this was years ago, they went to do a census. And when they went up into the mountains in Panama, people would hide their children with disabilities because for some reason they thought the government officials were coming in to remove their children. Somehow a rumor got started. They were coming after their children, so they hid them and they would not give them proper information. The Panama government was actually trying to figure out who was there so they could support them, but they hid them because they were distrustful of what was happening. So that happens so much all over the world. We hide
Yeah.
people disabilities, especially people like my daughter with Down syndrome or with autism, people that have, cerebral palsy, people that are albinos, which means you have a lack of pigment. What happens to people that are albinos in some African countries is horrifying because there's black magic associated with albino blood.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
and
there's some really bad things that are happening to people with disabilities that
yeah, and I don't
really.
think this is the curse of lack of history. Like, we don't really study history anymore. That the social conditioning residue from eugenics, people don't realize how huge of a movement eugenics was. Even
Still,
Braille, and and Alexander Graham Bell, who was very involved in that, it's got a dark history to why
oh,
he
yes, it
was,
does.
yeah, why he was not pro blind. Let's put it that way, or pro deaf for sure.
Right. Even though his
um
wife was deaf,
yeah, and his
he
his,
had,
his sister, yeah.
right, right. He was
Yeah,
surrounded by it,
he was a
but he was trying,
eugenicist, yeah.
yeah. And I remember one time there was something trending on Twitter. Got a large social, I'm sorry, I know it's called X now, but anyway, I'm still going to call
Yeah,
it.
it's okay.
But Richard Dawkins was
Right.
trending at the time. I'd heard his name, and he had made a comment. A student had asked him just a question, and she said, "Well, what happens if I find out if I have a fetus that has Down syndrome?" And he said, "Quote, abort it and try again." And that just, my husband was like having to pull me away from the computer. I was like, so I actually posted a picture of my daughter, who I think is quite beautiful. And I said, she's never going to be an Oxford scientist or a BBC talking head, but her life does matter. And BBC picked that picture and quote up and said, "Oh, good. Richard Dawkins picked a fight with the Down syndrome community." And he's like, "Well, I'm sure if I love somebody with Down syndrome, that'd be fine. You're
Yeah.
emotional." No, it's eugenics,
Yes.
Justin.
Right. Exactly. So the second system shaker question is about your challenges. And this is your living. This is both your calling and your living. So generally, this is around like we would ask any entrepreneur, what are your challenges? But we know this firsthand that mission driven brands have their own set of challenges. So what are you running into? What's the shit you're running into out there that is challenging
Well,
for
now
growing
it's
this?
and using your words, now the shit we're running into since we voted this president in the United States is pretty intense. It's like,
Hmm.
but it's also, I would not have recommended we do this, okay? But we did, and so now what's happened is, what I'm saying is, because everything has just been decimated. And we don't even
Right.
know how bad it is yet, and it has
No.
happened all over the world, where we used to take care of people to get them wheelchairs. Nope, we used to provide, anyway, everything has been cut to where you don't even understand what's happening. I was struggling with cash flow before, because if I'm willing to overlook that we're not having an impact and do it the way others were doing it, I could have made money, but I just couldn't do it. It was just too personal to me. And so I've always struggled with some cash flow, but the cash flow has been horrific now. But at the same time, it feels like something's shifting too, because I see a lot of the same behaviors, thinking that it's going to be different. It's not going to be, but okay. But it feels like something is shifting now, because it's illegal in some cases to do DEI in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. Texas.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Hmm.
Okay. So
Hmm.
it's interesting, because I think enough of that garbage has come out now. And that what I'm telling people is, the old saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, there are babies everywhere that we need to pick up and help. But
Hmm.
I think, once again, I wouldn't have done it this way, but we did. So now we have to look around and figure out, how we pick up the pieces. And by the way, what should we do? Because some of that didn't work. A lot of that crap didn't work. Some of this DEI, the backlash that our community is facing, some of it we deserve, and boy, that makes everybody
Hmm.
so mad. But the reality is, we
Right.
tried to cram in too much into it, and then our messages got hijacked by certain community members. Certain communities were louder than others, and they hijacked everything, and now it's a big mess. And I'm
Yeah.
not. Everybody needs to be included, so I'm not
Yeah.
criticizing. I think we just tried to force too much stuff, too much together, and that's why this has happened. But I also am hopeful at the same time. I am still
Yeah.
hopeful.
And it's the darkness is necessary to show the light. And we saw this. We recently were in the States, and we spent time. We were in Ohio, Kentucky, worked our way down to North Carolina, and saw to this client project, and the stark difference between like these acts of kindness. And there's this town in Kentucky called Louisa, Kentucky, that is, I had no idea, besides being the hometown of Tyler Childers, one of my favorite singers,
Yeah.
is a model for how to deal with the opioid crisis.
Right,
And it's a
right.
success story in Kentucky, in like this little town, like 1,000
Well, let's
people.
learn from that.
Yeah, right. And but I hear what you're saying too, like the challenge of almost like being the heretic, because the people that are traditionally they don't give a shit people they're not going to like you anyway, regardless. And then, but then when you're also being a heretic, what I hear in that is this nuance between representation and grievance.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the nuance, and people lump those together when it comes to brands because grievance is a pretty successful business model. It may even make you president of the United States twice. But representation, that's hard to do because it requires listening and critical thinking and nuance and practical solutions, moral clarity, a removal of hypocrisy. That shit's hard,
Yes,
so
and taking the microphone out of your hand and giving
yeah,
it to others. See,
yeah,
that's what I started doing. I started saying, "This is ridiculous. Why are you," not that I don't want people to hire my companies, but
right,
why are you bringing me in as a woman over a certain age, white woman from the US? Why don't you bring in the person with a physical disability that maybe is a darker colored skin? I started giving up my spot. And then people are
yeah,
like, "That's ridiculous, Deborah. Bring another chair to the table." Well, the reality is we all know there's only a certain amount of chairs at the table. Don't we all know that? And I know
hmm
we're talking and, paradoxically, I guess, but it's still true. No, you sometimes have to sit down and give the microphone to somebody else. You have to. You have to give other voices. The other day, I was talking to a group that has been started there, and they consider themselves AI experts. Okay, I don't know if anybody's an AI expert yet, but and so they were saying you just go to all the conferences, and if they want to talk about AI and inclusion of people with disabilities, send them to us. And it's like, okay. And so I went and looked at their speakers, and there was no diversity at all. And I said, but wait a minute, what if, somebody in Beijing, whatever, Bangladesh, Belize, I'll stay with my B names. Let's hear what they have to say. Oh, no, 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 no. It's like, okay, we're sick of it. Aren't y'all sick of that way of doing life?
hmm
I'm tired. No, you
hmm
self-appointed experts. No, stop it. We actually need people from the community that have experienced, as Virginia was saying, those life experiences. There's nothing better. I can pretend to tell you what it's like to be Latino. I can tell you what it's like to be a Spanish, but that is not my culture. As you said
yeah,
off air, Virginia, what comes out is your first language, something in certain situations, right? And so it's it's
mm,
just it's time for people to pay attention to the humans that are really making a difference and collaborating and working together and helping each other, because that is truly the only way forward. We have
yeah,
AI. We have AI
yeah,
now. We all have to be paying attention differently. And we
right,
have to be helping each other. We have to.
yeah,
And just to add something to what you were saying, it's true that there are not that many chairs at the table. I mean, they're limited. The same for the microphones. And I
Yes.
think that one thing that we, as social progressive or people that care about social change and social justice, we need to take into account is because times are different right now, and the noise is so much out there, especially through social media and the internet. Is so much noise that means that the mics are even fewer now than before. And instead of competing, especially in times where it feels that there is a lot of scarcity, that the policies are against us, that resources are more scarce, instead of trying to compete against each other to get that mic, to get that resource, to get that attention, we should if actually focus on building alliances and say like, hey, let's share the mic. So we
Yes.
hear many voices at the same time through the same mic, so we are not just stronger together within our community, but also in between communities. I mean,
right,
all of us. And that
right.
will make a greater impact than you by yourself yelling louder.
Right. You know what? Also, Virginia, you reminded me. There was this period of time, not that long ago, the Me Too movement years, and
hmm
I was seeing that if you would have a panel of all men, men would go, not just women, but men would say, "What are you thinking?" And no, I won't be on your panel if it's all men, because you're going to get a bunch of crap from the women. And so they were thoughtful about it, right? They were being thoughtful about, I know, including the minority of women, which is ridiculous because sometimes there are more women, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but then with this DEI mess, it was interesting to see which groups went right back to only doing the white men. And there's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with white men. I have a son that's a white man. That's an amazing man. Justin, I've talked to you. You're an amazing man. There's a lot of good
Yes.
men, but yeah, but the reality is we notice, by the way, which you are doing going backwards, we're noticing. And I know you don't think it matters that we're noticing, but it does
Oh
matter
yeah,
because we're not going
absolutely.
to forget. We're
Right.
watching.
Yeah.
We're
We're not
watching.
going to get to, people that look like me are not going to get to rewrite history this time.
Nope, nope, not this time.
Yeah.
Nope, we're going to
Yeah.
all do it
These
together,
these
and we're going
petty
to
little things like bringing back Columbus Day and all that. That shit
Today's
is
Columbus Day in the United
yeah,
States.
yeah, yeah.
And it's
Again,
not.
anyway.
We
Yeah.
used to, Justin, I forgot. There was another day. We celebrated something else today. And
Well, it used to
because,
be, yeah.
and
It
it,
used to be Indigenous Day under
right.
Biden, and then Trump overturned it
Yeah.
yesterday or last week. And anyway, we could go on and on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's go
Well,
to
and I
the
was
last
looking at
question
my
for
calendar and I saw on my calendar it was
yeah,
Columbus Day, and I'm like, okay.
yeah. It shouldn't be, but
All right,
anyway.
cool.
Okay. The last question is, um, what will be if you follow your mission and you achieve an impact? How will you know that you have made an impact with the work that you're doing?
Well, the one good thing about it, Virginia, is that I already feel I have made an impact. I remember, especially as I watched my beautiful husband die, I thought, I really thought about what I have contributed and I haven't accomplished what I wanted, but I have made an impact. The people that I'm working with, you know, I can feel good about it already. It's not big enough. I think I maybe, you know, if we have multiple lives, maybe I've been working on this for many, many lifetimes, but um, I feel already I could die and feel good about what I've done, except of course I'm not ready to. I really want to do so much more. And I think when I'll feel like I really had more impact, I will see more diverse leaders talking about this because we were
Mm.
seeing it a little bit and now we're not again, right? And we're seeing the people that can go to these conferences with their wine glasses at night, and it just looks like a big party that so many people don't get to be invited to. I can go, but I refuse to go now, and that also really that has made some people mad. But I said no, I'm not going to do it because it's not fair to the everybody else. Just because I can come in, no. And then now also they'll say, well, what do you do with your white privilege? Well, I've got the door open. I've got it wedged open. Come on in. So what are you doing with all of your privilege, right? Because we're all privileged in some way, right? What are you doing to help the
Mhm.
ones behind you? So it's
Preach.
funny as you talk about this, I can see my face on air. I can see my face getting flushed. So you're getting me all worked up. But it's just such an important
Yeah,
time in the world to be
yeah.
paying attention to what is being said. I hope people will work with y'all as consultants. I love the way y'all think. And this is how we move forward by working with consultants like you that get it, right? Because we've got to collaborate. We've got to collaborate. We cannot do this by ourselves anymore. And
Yes.
so, yeah.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. We say this all the time. You got to get your brand. If you got a good, I'll be more blunt. You want to fuck your mission up? Have a shitty brand and shitty leadership.
Hmm.
The
Oh, yeah.
opposite is true too, is if you want to live your mission to its fullest extent, get your brand right, get your leadership right, and then go get your community right. And so thank you for saying that. This has been a very insightful conversation. I took lots of notes, not even for my own self-reflection, because
Yeah.
I'm sort of constantly being exposed to my own biases sometimes. So it made me realize some things. And we'll put links to your stuff in the show notes, and we look forward to a future non-recorded conversation with you. So,
I
Yes.
agree. I agree. I agree. There's
and we're
some
gonna,
really, really
yes,
happy,
fun
beautiful
things to
things
talk about.
happening. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
There
Well, we're
is
gonna.
there's
Oh,
things
sorry.
to
Go
be
ahead, Deborah.
well,
Mhm.
I interrupted you, Justin, but there are things to be hopeful about. There
There
is.
are,
Let's
and
move on.
people like you are. That's one of them, and the
Yes.
work you're doing. Well,
Yes.
we're gonna go to the second show, so we're gonna say goodbye to you for now. Thank you so much, Deborah. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys.
All right. That was really fascinating. I think I keep thinking about what I said at the beginning, that when we talk about diversity, the conversation has become narrow and narrow, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Depends who is on trend at that
Mm-hmm.
moment, or, even when we speak in the whole term of diversity and inclusion. Usually we talk mostly about the community we belong instead of
Mm-hmm.
all the communities that we should be included. So
Yeah.
it's very
Well,
important to have that kind of reminders that the
yeah.
inclusion should include more people.
Yes. And that was kind of, I think, what Deborah was alluding to. I don't want to speak for her, of course, but there was so this is some extrapolation is when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that includes people with disabilities, is we're not talking about quotas, number one. Number two is we're not talking about identity politics. We're it's the sense of it's like with the with Mark's foundation, Divine All Along, and the one of the key messages from there, and for the folks listening, Divine All Along is a advocacy nonprofit for queer Christians, and the line that they have is, "Without you, we're not whole." And it's around the centuries of rejection of queer people by the church.
Yeah.
Well, there's a version of that for disabled people too, and it's about wholeness, and it's not about optics. And that's why I talk about representation versus grievance. And I love that she is challenging sort of the jet set side of it. I was curious about your reaction, someone that has been in nonprofit a long time now. Your nonprofit work, you've 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 probably seen some variation of that, because the stark difference between, let's say, like US based nonprofits and the greater, what is the proper term for
The
Latin
global
America?
south.
The global south, thank you. And the
Yeah.
global south nonprofits too, is that sort of contrast there. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but
There is a huge contrast, and we can make a whole podcast just about that, and actually will be interesting. We should
that would be an interesting one. Yes,
find a
right.
couple of person to invite on this and talk
Yes,
about the work on nonprofit and the leadership style and
right,
the how we build, what we understand by democracy and participation in the nonprofit sector
right.
in
Yes,
different part of the world. That will be fascinating. But coming back to this topic
yes.
about inclusion and disabilities, one thing that was often that we didn't have the time to bring in the conversation, but I've been thinking about it. I mean, since we started, is about the talking about technology. It's about the internet and social media and how it became like a boom. Like seriously, we don't have that many years since all this started, and it's growing
Right.
really fast and is progressing really fast, and now AI included and everything. And even though there are some, I mean, technology, if we talk in the broader term, has done a lot of advancements in terms of including people, giving people access to information and communication tools, through internet and some apps and, microphone and text to voice, for instance, things like that help people that have some disabilities to have been able to access to that technology and use it. It's still very, very exclusive. I
Hmm.
feel that both the internet and social media in general are still very, very exclusive. Just to start with, the fact that um, I remember when the internet started and I was studying communication for development, communication for social change. We got a study, was a recent study that says that 92% of the content um, out there on the internet, accessible on the internet, was in English. Just that excluded
Hmm.
more than, like 2/3 of the world population, and was supposed to
Right.
be the worldwide web,
Right.
right? Was supposed to be global, but few people have access to participate in the public dialogue because it was only focused on one language. Now it's different. There is way more content production in different languages. But when you think about the language at that time, I think it's still valid for other kind of access and expressions and way of interact with the technology that is still very geocentric, very focused on geocentric and Eurocentric in many ways,
Hmm.
and focus on what is the style, what is the way of communicating, what is the type of interaction, what is the style of leadership and content production and branding and all that are creating the algorithm are excluding a lot of people based on disabilities, obviously, but also other cultural and other characteristics. So it's just think
Mm.
about technology that we think is inclusive. Actually, pay attention. I invite everyone to just pay attention to when you're interacting with the internet or social media. Ask yourself, what if I had a disability, this disability, or what if I didn't speak this language? What if I had another way of communicating based on my culture? How
Yeah.
included will I feel in this social media or in this website or in this forum, for
Hmm.
instance? And it will be an interesting exercise just to raise our level of consciousness, to play a little bit
Yeah.
with the scenarios.
Yeah. Well, I think social media in particular, there's an opportunity in here too, which is self-representation. The awareness of the experiences of a person with disabilities. Social media has been an amplifier in a very positive way for people because they can self-represent. They don't have to wait for an association to represent them or a congressperson who is an advocate. Those are great, but it's self-representation, to tell the right to tell your own story, in a way that is provocative. And there's several examples of people with Down syndromes that have millions of followers on social media, um,
Yeah.
and that what that has done to kind of pierce change the conversation. And it's like I said when we were chatting with Deborah about, I don't think people are really aware of how much they're still influenced by the decades of eugenics teachings in our society, that that you're defective. What I think a lot of people, when they hear disabled, they think, oh, that person's defective. And they have different challenges. Somebody that is not able-bodied, for example, has different challenges. But you ask Mohan about his daughter, she was not defective. She was just having a different experience than someone that had their vision or whatever. And I think that's the mindset that still needs to shift, because once you see that people with disabilities are not defective, they're just having a different experience, you're going to be able to learn from them too. And again, that's kind of the essence of what diversity, equity, and inclusion really is about. It's about that the sum of the parts made more whole and more made better because of diversity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with it's true that social media has allowed, and technology, using your phone to record voice and
Hmm.
videos and allows for self-representation in a way better ways than before, when was everything concentrated on mass media, for instance. But still, you have to, if you want to reach out a lot of people with your message and with your perspective, you still have to follow the rules of the game that
Oh
are
yes.
defined by corporations based on their
Right.
economic interests and political interests and ideologies, and not
Yeah.
necessarily like the true pluralism as we want to
Yes.
believe. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's sad that, yeah, you can represent yourself and you might be visible and your experience visible as long as you play the game. And
Yes.
so that
That's true.
that
Yeah.
that hurts a little bit and limits a lot of the self-representation that they
Right.
want to see.
But I think that's what I'm saying though, is that self-representation and visibility um, does have an influence on policy. So I love like her billion strong. I mean, that's a visibility thing and a
Yes.
voices platform. Like you said, it's a platform. It's not just advocacy. And um, it doesn't seem like it sometimes when you see what this administration in particular is focusing on, the stupidest shit in the most cruel way. It's like you take stupid ideas and implement them in a cruel way. It doesn't seem like the market is determining policy, but I think it's an anomaly. I think it's in its last days, hopefully, where, last days in the sense of like in our lifetime, hopefully that
Mhm.
we'll see again, the back to the rule of market pressure and social pressure are the same thing. He kind of broke that rule, sadly.
And many other
Which,
countries have
yeah,
done it.
yeah,
Many other governments have done it. So
yeah,
it's
broke the
not
rule.
that
Yeah,
omnipotent after all.
right.
The free market is not
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
most
You need both.
powerful
You still
thing.
need both. Yeah, you still need policy, smart policy, but smart policy also comes from social pressure. Sometimes you cannot rely on the goodness of politicians to take care of shit. That we do know. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, any other thoughts or takeaways?
Well, there are many, but actually, I think that the most important one for me, at least, is that I'm. It's a good reminder to pay attention again. I mean, we take for granted a lot of the privilege that we have, including abilities that other
Hmm.
people don't have, and things like that. As she said, because of our age, and my age in particular, I mean, being a woman, uh, I feel like dealing with a lot of things, and that
Right.
reminds me every day how fragile we are in many ways,
Yeah.
but it's still not the same. And I have
Right.
experienced the privilege of having able body and, in general, like having not serious disabilities my whole life. And it's a good reminder to, from time now and then, to just stop and review what it will like. And that will help to keep empathy up,
Hmm.
or my level of empathy up, and being able to interact with other people in a way that is fair and that is
Yeah.
according to my values. But I need to do the check
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah. It
to make
reminds me
sure.
of that. There's that Instagram trend or whatever that's where it says instead of an OnlyFans, I'm gonna start an Only Pains. So I'm gonna just talk about how I hurt myself today because I like the one guy's like I threw a softball and I dislocated my arm because I'm 40 now.
Yeah,
It was like wait till you're 50, almost 55. Even though I do feel physically better than I have most of the rest of my prior life, but yeah. But perspective, gratitude, compassion, um, those are the things that I guess here's what I'll end with. I do not understand, and I never really have understood this, and even in my more like narrower thinking days, how someone would arrive at a conclusion that you should not extend compassion to someone because of something they didn't decide, didn't choose for themselves.
yeah,
That's so bizarre to me. And so, like, such a violation of, Jesus and Mr. Rogers. It's, I just don't understand that psyche. That's another topic for another time. But, um, well, this is another episode of the Massive Change Show. We got some amazing guests coming up. And Debra, all of our guests have been amazing with such interesting diversity of backgrounds. And gone from like STOPE to visualization tools for leadership. That's an episode coming up to We're going to have an episode coming up with the founders of a competitor sort of to Amazon in some ways, that's pretty audacious. But as always, if you know of any system shakers that would make a good guest, please introduce us. If you know of system shakers that need some support with their brand, their leadership development, and their community activation, hit us up. This is what we do. So we're born to do it. We want to do more of it. So with
Thank
that,
you.
we'll say good night, good day for now. Take care.